Hey, welcome back to the channel. Welcome to another video. Today, what I want to do is make a video on the Sony A7 III and do a really long-term review on this camera. Now, we've owned a couple of these cameras now for well over the last year, kind of going on almost a year and a half, I think, in total. So got a lot of experience on this camera. I have a lot to say about it, but this video, I want to just try to make it as honest as possible, kind of take away all of the, fanboy perceptions and people who are on one side or the other, and just give you a really down-to-earth, very practical, hopefully very useful review on this camera, and whether or not it might be something that you would consider purchasing and investing into. So I don't really want to waste any time. Let's just jump right into it and kind of just giving you an overview of this camera. When it first came out 2 years ago, if you remember, there was so much attention, so much buzz. Everybody was raving about it because for the price, it really kind of blew everything in its competition out of the water with what it was offering in terms of specs and just everything that it packed inside the camera. And then something that I noticed is that once everybody started getting their hands on the camera, especially first-time Sony users, what we kind of saw were a lot of people saying, hey, the specs are amazing. It's great to have all these features, but this camera, I don't know. It's lacking something. It's not as easy to use as my Canon or my Panasonic or whatever the story was. And that kind of leads me to my first point of the video, and something that you absolutely should consider before you buy this is that, I'm going to be honest, this camera is not the easiest to use. It takes a lot of time to really learn it inside and out, especially if you're a first-time Sony user, which we were when we first bought these cameras. Now, that shouldn't scare you away or make you think that this camera isn't great, because it totally is. All I'm saying is that straight out of the box, I think Sony's intention with this camera was to really make it customizable and personalized for each individual user, not necessarily just a standard palette that everybody can use, and no matter who you are, you're going to get great results from it. It takes time to learn. It takes time to really just know the ins and the outs and figure out, what do all the menus mean? Some of the language that you'll see in the menus are different than any other camera that I've personally seen. And as I said, that takes a while to figure out. But let's talk about the usability of this camera, because I think that's such an important thing to realize, is not only what image is coming out of the camera, but what's the user experience like? How does it feel while you're using it? Now, this will be one of the first things that I actually bash on this camera for, and that's the back LCD screen. Honestly, in my opinion, the screen sucks. I don't really think there's anything positive about it, other than just, I guess, the fact. Okay, so a lot of people obviously want the flip out screen or the flip up screen. This camera's kind of stuck in the middle, where it just has kind of like a halfway tilting screen. There is hardly any touch functions, which kind of bums me out, because Canon and Panasonic and other companies have been having a fully functioning touchscreen now for many years, and it's not a very bright screen. There's not a lot of detail that comes out of it. I think you get a much better idea of what your image is going to look like if you actually look through the EVF, which, even that isn't the best either. But all in all, the screen is probably my biggest complaint, and there are ways around it. You can just get used to the screen, which is what I've done. You can also buy an external monitor, which is another thing that we've done, which I'm using that right now. Other than that, I think you just have to really get used to the screen and realize that sometimes what you see on the back screen isn't going to be exactly what you see once you actually put the file into your computer. So the screen is obviously a big bummer, but with that being said, there are a ton of benefits with the usability on this camera as well. And one of those is going to be the custom features, the custom function buttons. This camera, what you won't see is your traditional like white balance and ISO buttons that you might be used to on other cameras, but it does give you 4 custom buttons that are very easy to use, very easy to set, your preferred settings to. So for me, I have my white balance set to one of those. And then not only with those 4 buttons, but you have an entirely separate custom function menu that I believe gives you 12 different slots that you can basically set, you know, a quick setting to. So you have a total of 16, basically, you have 16 custom function buttons all at the touch of your fingertips, which is really nice. You don't have to dive deep into the menus, which that can be kind of confusing at times. So I do appreciate that. And then not only do you have all of those things, but you have, I don't know what the technical word is, but you have 3 little spinny wheels on this camera. Here, I'll just show you. You've got this one right here. You've got this one up here. And then on the front of the camera, you've got this one right there. And for me, the way I've set that up is I've got one for my ISO, one for my shutter, and one for my aperture, which makes it incredibly just very useful and very easy to use. So all in all, with the usability of this camera, there are tons of things that I like, few things that I don't like. I think there's really not a right or a wrong answer or response to this. It's just, what is your preference? What do you enjoy? Do you like having everything, you know, preset and ready for you, that you don't have to do any customization or guessing? Then you might not like this camera. But if you like having total freedom, total flexibility to make this camera however you want it to be, then I think you might like it. So let's move on to the performance side of things, which this is where most people spend their time and their attention. And I think for good reason, because at the end of the day, what you can produce from this camera is really all that matters. That's all that you'll ever, you know, get paid for. That's all that people will ever see. And so, you know, performance is obviously a big deal. Now, this camera is spec'd out to the max, and I'll just run through some of those for you real quick. We've got IBIS, we've got dual card slots, we've got 10 frames continuous, or 10 frames per second continuous shooting, I think with the electronic shutter. We've got 120 frames per second in 1080, 4K, 24 frames per second without a crop, so full frame. And then in 30 frames per second, there's a slight crop. There's eye autofocus. There are more picture profiles than you'll ever know what to do with. And the battery life, in my opinion, well, it's not even my opinion, I think it's just a fact. The battery life in this camera is the best in its class. It's the best for any mirrorless camera that is around the price point of the A7 III. Now let's talk about image quality. I'll be real with you. The image quality of this camera in 4K, it's great, but it could be a heck of a lot better. Especially if you think about something like the GH5, which allows you to shoot 10-bit 422 internal in Cinema 4K, which is just unbelievable if you think about it. The camera here, the Sony A7 III, it only shoots 8-bit 420 internal, and it only shoots that at 100 megabits per second, which, I don't know, it's got its, you know, positive and negatives. It doesn't let you color grade as much as you might be able to on other cameras. But then again, your 4K video files will be a lot smaller than other cameras as well. So it just depends on what you're going for. The 1080 is very usable, but it's not something that I ever rely on. The only time I'm shooting 1080 is in slow-mo. Other than that, I'm always shooting in 4K, just trying to take advantage of the full frame, you know, no crop sensor that we're getting out of this. And speaking of the no crop, you know, I don't want to harp on that too much because we've all, you know, heard the rants and raves going on about this, but it is really nice having a no crop at, you know, a full frame no crop 4K shooting option. You know, that just means that your lenses are going to show you exactly what they are. You don't have to worry about punching in or cropping in. But the cool thing is if you want to crop in, something that I love about this camera that I don't ever use in photo mode, but when I'm shooting video, is the APS-C mode that you can quickly jump into, which will turn your full frame camera into a crop sensor camera, giving you a 1.5, I believe, 1.5 crop, which if you ever do want to punch in and get that extra distance, you have the ability to do so on this camera. Now, staying in the realm of performance, I think where this camera truly shines is in its dynamic range. Yes, for video, but also for photo. Actually, mostly in photo, I would say, which maybe I should have said this at the beginning of the video, but I'm doing this review from a hybrid shooter's perspective, meaning I shoot both video and photo. And odds are, I'm assuming if you own or you're considering buying this camera, you are in the same boat as I am, as, you know, being a hybrid shooter. So the photography dynamic range in this camera is just unreal. The Sony RAW files that you get out of this, my gosh, I mean, you can completely over or completely underexpose your image, and these files just let you bring back so much information that unfortunately, well, I guess it's fortunate, but I don't know, you don't even have to be a good photographer and know what you're doing, and you can still pull some really great images out of this camera. So in my opinion, one of the best features that you're going to be getting from this camera is the dynamic range, which again, you know, when we're talking about image quality and whether or not your videos look professional or not, dynamic range plays such a large part in making a camera look really high end. And so if that's something that's super important to you, then I think this camera might be a great option. Now, I'm kind of wrapping up this video, kind of wrapping up the review. All in all, the important thing to remember is that there are no perfect cameras. This is by no means a perfect camera. There are many things that I like. There are also many things that I don't like about it. I think the important thing is figuring out what matters most to you, what specs, what features, what requirements do you need in a camera. Do you shoot mostly video? Do you shoot mostly photo? Are you kind of 50-50? Do you not really know what you're going to be shooting? Do you want to just cover all your base? You're right. There's so many different situations for each and every person. At the end of the day, you got to figure out what makes sense best for you. And with that being said, neither this camera nor any camera for that matter is going to make you a good videographer or a good photographer. Cameras can't make you be good at anything. At the end of the day, it all comes down to, you know, the work that you're willing to put in, the time you're willing to spend practicing, and just your own creative skill. So it's important to remember that as well. But anyways, obviously I didn't cover every single thing about this camera. I do not want to make a video going over every little detail, but I'd be more than happy to respond to any questions that you might have. So if there's something I didn't go over that you really would love to know, please leave me a comment down below, or you can always go over to my Instagram as well and send me a direct message over there. But yeah, that's about it for today. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the time, and I'll see you guys in the next video.